Welcome to today's episode of Magnus Mindset Podcast, where it's our mission to help you grow in the skills, knowledge, and relationships to help you live your best. I'm your host, Tim Balo, and if you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another podcast episode. Hey, in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the second installment of our discussion on habits. Last time we talked about how important it is to know who you are so that you know what to do. It's all about determining your identity, which will help you to determine the kinds of choices and habits and goals that we want to have. Nobody really plans on living paycheck to paycheck. We're not stressing over money. Nobody plans to become overweight and find themselves in poor health, maybe dying young, missing the grandkids. Nobody wants to or plans on getting addicted, getting out of control, losing their marriage, losing trust in their children. Nobody plans on having a mediocre life with zero passion, zero drive, zero vision, and just a life that's sort of wasted. And it rarely ends up going in the wrong place because of one bad choice, right? It's really one step at a time, one day at a time, and really one bad habit at a time that we find ourselves in a place where, hey, this is not what I intended my life to look like. This is not what I thought my life would look like at this age. And as we talked about last week, based on who you want to become, then what habit do we need to break? You're going to set that as a goal. You're going to take a look at some of those good habits and some of those bad habits, and we're going to start to work through some of those kinds of things. So when it comes to bad habits, it's a little more difficult because we perceive the benefit now with a bad habit, but we kind of push out negative results until later. So for instance, when it comes to smoking, we all know smoking is really, really dangerous. Even vaping has been determined to not be good for your lungs. Pretty much anything that goes in your lungs, it should just be air, right? And we don't think about the immediate consequences. We actually kind of just enjoy the moment, but we are pushing out those negative results until like decades later, you find out that you have cancer. We might start having a drink, every night because, you worked hard today, so you earned it. And years later, you find out you have cirrhosis of the liver because you have been drinking really 3 drinks every night for the last several years. We keep kicking out the consequences, the results, those negative results of those bad habits. So how do we break a bad habit? Now, you might not have anything like what I just described. It's just one of those little things that you're kind of like, boy, I'd really like to see this out of my life. Or maybe it's a big thing. How do you take care of a big thing? Small positive steps in the right direction can really move you over time, like we talked about. So, number one, you need to acknowledge that you can't defeat what you cannot define. You cannot defeat what you cannot define. So you need to identify where those bad habits are. When it comes to maybe overeating, is it because of opportunity? Is it because you have a sugar addiction? Is it because you don't want to cook, so you would do fast food all the time? When it comes to maybe your digital life, you're video gaming, you're binging social media, you end up spending just a whole lot of time on your mobile device and you're missing out on relationships. Maybe there's some other things going on in your life. You find yourself in other addictive areas, like maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's nicotine, maybe it's the sugar, or maybe it's prescription drugs, or it's just activities that are, you find, distancing yourself from not only others in relationship, but also it's just not who you wanted to be, right? It's not who you thought you would be by this time. So here's some ideas for us to how to break a bad habit when it comes to this. Number one, you want to make it difficult to do. You want to make it difficult to actually engage in your bad habit. I don't know if you realize this or not, but the studies have shown that we only have so much willpower in a day, right? So we're fighting, and we got up in the morning, we ate a healthy breakfast. I'm just going to use this as an example. We ate a healthy breakfast, we did our walk, we put in some exercise, we're doing great, we've staved off all this stuff, and you've done that for maybe several days, and then the coworker brings in the donuts, right? And I don't know about you, but I love me a good donut. And you're just like, I'll just eat maybe half of it, right? So might as well, you start to eat it. Well, here's what happens. You get back into this habit loop. You only had so much willpower, and that willpower is now burned up when that other donut shows up. And so you end up eating the donut. Then you eat the donut. Now you're feeling really bad about that, right? Because now you've had the habit break into your life again. I told myself I wasn't going to eat donuts. Well, Okay, you ate a donut. So what do we do? Because in that case, somebody else brought in the donut, right? So we have to make those things difficult for us to do. So we're going to watch for triggers, right? Because in the habit loop, there is what's called a trigger, then your action, and what you think is a reward. They would trigger your action and then what you think is a reward. So here's how we're going to stop a bad habit. We are going to remove the trigger. We're actually going to interrupt that action, right? Because if it goes trigger to action, and then we're going to get our perceived reward, we have to remove the trigger, and that will actually interrupt the action. There are 5 major triggers when it comes to some of our bad habits. Number 1 is the place. Is a major trigger. So if you find yourself that if you're out with friends and you are trying to stop your alcohol consumption, or at least lower your alcohol consumption, whatever that might look like for you, going out to the bar is going to make it very, very difficult to hang. If you're hanging with friends where there's always alcohol, that's difficult. Another major trigger is time. If you're trying to, say, minimize the amount of caffeine, but coffee is that thing. When you wake up in the morning and that first sip of coffee is like your morning routine, but you're trying to do that down, it's going to be that time that in the morning you're going to have to find something else to break that trigger. Another trigger is mood. We find that a lot of times when it comes to our relationships, if I'm in a certain mood, well, guess what? My words are unkind. I'm not responding to a conversation. I'm more like reacting to. So the place is a trigger. The time can be a trigger. Our mood can be a trigger. And even in that moment, can be a trigger. It feels like, it looks like, it reminds me of, and so I end up back in my old bad habit again. And the last of those 5 major triggers is really the people. Realizing that the people who are associated is what happens in our mind. We associate certain activities and certain lifestyle with certain people. So if you're trying to make a move toward, financial security and you want to be good at budgeting, don't hang out with people who are handling their money very poorly, who are racking, credit card debt. When we're hanging out with those people and they say, hey, let's go on a spending spree, and you're like, I don't want to be that. And then they're like, oh, boo, poo, poo, right? We don't want to be in that spot. So we're going to work with the people, and I'm not saying cut off all your relationships, but be selective of the people who are going to create triggers when you don't want to go into that bad habit again. Studies have shown that, like in this case, if your coworkers are eating a healthy lunch, it actually does better that you eat a healthy lunch. If they're obese and eating poor lunches, other people are eating poor lunches. I just find that really, really fascinating. So you really want your closest friends to be winning in their relationships and their skills and in their knowledge. They're in all those different areas of finance and health and faith. They're winning, and that's the people that you really want to hang around with. It is almost impossible to live the right life among the wrong friends. You've got folks who are just going to keep bringing you down. And it's really kind of one of those things of when it comes to you're hitting the snooze bar 4 times in the morning. Well, then you need to move the clock or the phone to the other side of the room that causes you to get up and go. If you're overspending on Amazon, well, then give your friend or a family member, a trusted person, so a password that they have to put in before you can buy anything. You're going to help break some of those triggers that are causing you to have a negative action, right? So the idea behind this is that why resist a temptation tomorrow that you have the power to really eliminate today? You can put things into place to help protect yourself from those negative actions. So again, coming back to the who I want to be will actually help me to avoid that bad habit. So every time I choose to avoid a bad habit, the evidence starts to build up of who I really am, and that is a positive thing in the right direction. So when it comes to our triggers, watch out for those major triggers of place, time, mood, moment, and people, and just stop, get away, walk away. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure that you share it with a friend. Again, remember to click subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the episodes of this podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.